Could have fixed this. Good evening and welcome, everyone. We really appreciate you coming out tonight for this first of very, hopefully many and exciting meetings about a potential rebuild of Highland High School. We're excited to get your input and hear everything that you have to say. But again, this is going to be a long journey, and today is just simply the first step. My name is Jeremy Chatterton. I'm the principal here at Highland, and thank you. And again, I just want to welcome you. At this time, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Mr. Paul Schulte, Salt Lake School District Director of Facilities.
Yeah, way to go. Good evening. Again, like Jeremy said, my name is Paul Schulte. It's great to be here with you tonight and start this journey. My main purpose tonight is twofold. I'm going to tell you just a little bit about the process and then introduce the architects. We have two significant goals in this process, and I really want to express my appreciation to my boss, Business Administrator Alan Kersley. We visited probably close to 10 to 12 schools over the last year or so, and one thing we came away with is a commitment to build the best possible instructional facility in school for the kids and the students in Salt Lake City. That's number one. We're going to build it and make sure it's the best facility for our children, the best space to learn. And then the number two is Highland has a great tradition, and we want to make sure that how we build this building and the way that we build it, that we honor the rich tradition that is Highland High. I guess, I'm probably being a little inappropriate here, but I bet we find a way to get a Dean Collect Commons in the new school. And so we're going to honor that, but the first priority is make sure the students of Salt Lake City School District deserve to have the most efficient, professional, modern school, and that's what our commitment is. It was very rigorous to be selected as an architect both for the West project and this one. It was very competitive, and we had 4 exceptional firms. But we're very happy to be with Naylor Wentworth Lunn. They'll be doing the majority of their presentation tonight. I do want to emphasize, and Jeremy kind of alluded to this just briefly, the process of what we're in. This is what we call we're doing a feasibility study. So what we want to do is we have a blank page, and we're just going to look at all the different ways that potentially we can build a school on this property. It's staying here on this campus. And what the potential cost would be, what are the programming that we're going to need, and those type of things. And it's a feasibility. It's a little bit different than if we're starting out right now to build a school. And then we're preparing for a potential bond, and a lot of the information that we get from this feasibility study will help the board organize themselves to prepare a bond election, which would be a year from November. So it's a little bit different. We're not quite as in-depth as if we're ready to construct it yet, but this will be great because we'll be very prepared to be able to pivot at the time that after a bond. So I'd like to introduce our folks from Naylor Wentworth Lund, and I'll have them introduce their team. Philip. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks for letting us be here. We're super excited. We want to let this be very fluid, so if there's thoughts that come up from the committee that we've been a part of, we'd love to invite any of those comments. So first off, the Highland High School site, which everyone here is very familiar with. We've had the opportunity to work on a number of projects within this school, so we're pretty familiar with what the systems are here and how this school functions. And we're excited to be able to work on this feasibility study to look at what might occur on a replacement high school. As Paul mentioned, we're really just at the very beginning of a nice, might be 4, 5, 6 month process. We like to think of it that we're really at the gathering stage. We're just trying to determine what it is we're going to be looking at. We're going to look at the experience of the student, what are the space needs within the school, within the athletics, within all functions of the school. Then from there, and with many meetings with committees and the group that we're with, we'll create some concepts, and we'll start to present those to this group, to the Salt Lake City School District group, the students, parents, the community. Along with those designs, we'll be creating estimates, because along with the feasibility and the designs that we come up with, we've got to figure out what this thing's going to cost or what it potentially could cost. Because some of the feasibility questions might be, if we do this, it's this much. If we do this, it might be less, right? So there's a lot of moving parts there. And then really the third major step is a recommendation to the board. And so everyone's aware that's planned for February 1st. So that's kind of our goal, is to get this through this entire process between now and February 1st. There aren't scheduled meetings yet, but we think there's probably 2 or 3 more of these types of meetings. And there's probably meetings 2 or 3 times a week, whether here or at the district, all through that entire process. So just know that there's a lot of information being first gathered, developed into these concepts, and then part of that recommendation. So we've been digging in again to what Highland is and the rich tradition here. I think one of the greatest things is that the way that football field sits, it's just one of a kind, I think. Of course, the Dean Collette Commons that Paul mentioned, that's a must. When we did our tour a couple weeks ago now, there was things like that, and the Harold Peterson Art Center or Art Wing was another thing we talked about, of bringing those things into this new building, and how does that affect this feasibility. One of the other things that we've talked about even is taking some of the artwork that is a part of this building, and how do we introduce that potentially into this next building. So it's not just a total departure, but it's really a continuation of the tradition that's been here. And again, just to reiterate what Paul said, the Salt Lake City School District students deserve the best educational experience possible, and we're really excited to be a part of that. I didn't mention, but I'm a product of the Salt Lake City School District, so I'm very excited to be a part of this and watch this happen. Just a little bit about some of the current educational pieces within the building. Of course, the commons, the hallway down to the courtyard, just some traditional sort of rows and just fixed desks, if you will. This is one of the rooms being used. And again, what's being used here is great, but what can we do better? What can we increase for the educational experience of the student? Here's a potential, this is a almost finished product that we are finishing up this summer, actually. It's just add some collaboration. This is at a school district up in Ogden, just as an idea of what might come of this process. Again, we don't know. It's a blank slate, but right now we're just saying, what are some possibilities? We want to create an unrivaled academic experience for these students. And we think we can do that with the support of the district and the community. Here's another example of some similar sort of collaboration spaces that we've been working on. Again, we're not saying that this is the solution, but this is the kind of thing that we're going to bring to say, hey, you've been doing it this way. Now, what if we think about doing it this way? And just see how that kind of melds into what this feasibility process is. But graphics like this are what we'll start to generate so that everybody can get on the same page as to what we're planning and what we think may come of this, this new school. So who are we? I guess we've been speaking for a few minutes. This is the team that we have. Most of us are here tonight, but you'll see us in these next set of meetings. And then I wanted to point out just a statement that we've kind of lived by, if you will, for the last few years in our office. And we call it the 3 E's whenever we're in the office: equity, economics, and environment. And we think about trying to achieve each of these with the decisions that we make. Equity, keeping it the same for all, right? Getting everybody up to the same. It's not everybody has the same. It's that everybody's brought to the same level. Economics, of course, we want to make sure we're smart with the money the taxpayers are paying. And the environment, I think, is twofold. One, the environment that we're learning in, but also how are we affecting the environment with our decisions. We've had some experience with the district beyond the work here. We were part of the Edison Elementary School. If anybody is familiar with that, it was a replacement school down on 4th South and almost Redwood Road. And we were excited to be able to continue our relationship with Salt Lake. So we wanted to also just talk about a few other schools that we've done similar processes to. By no means are we saying this is what we're doing here, but just to give you guys an idea of what we've done. We were looking at it today, and in the last about 20 years, we've worked on about a dozen high school campuses and did major additions or remodels while students occupied those sites. And that's an important thing. We've had the majority of our projects in our office in the K-12 level have been with students on site with no incidents. And that's really a part of the design that we come up with in that feasibility today, is not only what is the final product going to be, but how do we get there? This is Murray High School. It's almost 20 years old now. That'd be just right about 20 years. And this kind of wrapped around the existing building. You can see it overlapped one little portion that we had to deal with in an early phase. And what it created was a nice courtyard. There was a little section of an existing building that remained. Lehigh High School just opened up, the final phase just opened up this last fall. They started school in the entire building. In this phase, at this project, this was the existing building here. You can kind of see with some white roofs and gray roofs. These 2 orange pieces were newer additions that the school district said, hey, we got to keep those from a cost standpoint. They're too new to tear down. So in our studies, what we determined was we relocated the CTE building kind of to another portion on the site, which allowed sections of the building to be demoed. This is the main classroom piece, and they brought in a large satellite classroom building so the students had a place to have those classes. While after that was complete, they were able to tear down or build the north athletics piece and the south auditorium, and which was kind of housed in here. And so the students were using this. Then this came down. They built in the centerpiece. Again, this was all while students were on site, and they ended up with a new campus, including a kind of a revamped track around their football field. Just a couple of photos. This is that new auditorium. That's a section of the building that was to remain, so we connected a little bit of classroom to it. There's another view. You can see that's the other piece of the classroom building that remained. The front door never changed. That's the new gymnasium. This entire middle piece was demolished and rebuilt all during that school year, and the students just created a pathway around, and it was a very active site, I will say, but worked out very well. A couple of indoor shots just to give you an idea. This is the lobby at the gymnasium, a new media center that was kind of in the heart of the school. Currently under construction, Skyline High School. This is also a phased project. The initial phase was actually to relocate the football field, so it kind of got out of the way so that the first phase of construction could take place, the north field house. The existing gymnasium is kind of north part of that existing building, so once that field house is complete, which just finished this summer, they now can tear down the current athletics, build the academic building. Once that is complete, they can tear down the majority of the current academic building to build the performing arts, and then the final summer, they'll tear the rest down and finish out the site. A couple images of that plan. Again, it's still under construction and has yet to be opened up in these kind of front door pictures. So what is a feasibility study? What are you going to see out of that? That's what we wanted to present today. We're going to kind of touch base on these 6 items here. It's program documentation, what we refer to as design guidelines and imperatives, adjacency diagrams. It'll help us kind of define what's where in the building. What we see in these school community council and these focus workshops, some site planning demonstrations here, and then of course sustainability.
All right, so these aren't listed in any order of importance, but programming is one of the important things we do. We need to know how big the school needs to be. We need to know what spaces you need now and for the future. Maybe there are things that you haven't had and you have the opportunity now to obtain them. So we look at your existing school, we meet with the staff, we meet with students, we talk to the community, and we learn about what is it that you really want as part of this new high school. What is this opportunity going to create a new high school? So the program is one of the steps that we're going to be taking here very soon. And again, meeting with the community. We can't say that enough. We are involving the community, we're involving teachers, we're involving parent groups, we're going to be working with middle schools, and we want input from the community. And we hope that you all feel that you have that opportunity. We have the survey, which you all took a card, and you can access our website. You can comment there, take the survey, and we look forward and we hope that these groups get to be bigger and bigger as we move on. Next one. So the other thing that we do is we kind of, as we do these programs and we meet with the community, we kind of come up with these guidelines. What's important to make this school Highland High School, and what's important to the teaching staff, what's important to the community, and we create these guidelines and we provide them in writing so that every time that we think of something, we go back to these guidelines, and this is what we follow to work through the program and to make this the school it needs to be. Just a few different ways we do that. We look at a lot of different items. How many different?
There's about 150, I think, in this book, and I think the point here is the way that Granite School District or Murray School District does it is not the way that Salt Lake's going to do it. So we take these guidelines that we've learned on the way, and we say, okay, Salt Lake, what's your approach? What's the approach for Highland High School? So what you see here is just a couple of examples from that design guideline book that was created for another school. So like this one happens to talk about individual, one-on-one, and group learning, where the next one may be focused on, it's an imperative, at least at that district, saying that we are going to create large and flexible labs. We want to look at overhead versus underfloor utilities and kind of weigh those options. So this is just, again, an example of kind of what those deliverables might be as we get through this process before we have that final recommendation. Daylight and the importance of daylight is something that we want to bring up to the district and then find out, is that an imperative to them or is that just a guideline? So that's something that we'll weigh with all the groups that we work with. Flexible classrooms is another major thing right now about how are we going to use that classroom. Is it 30 kids in a seat? Is it change size based on kind of how many students are in there? So there's a lot to discuss as we get through these design guidelines and imperatives.
Another thing we do is once we've got the spaces, we need to know how they interact with each other. So we come up with adjacency diagrams. We call them bubble diagrams. And they just kind of help us determine how this building needs to be laid out. Right now, it might not be laid out optimally. It was built in 1956, and they did things differently then, and I know the school district has adapted over the years to try to do their best as things change, but we'll look at adjacencies, but we also look at how those can be flexible so that you have the flexibility in the future to change things. So adjacencies.
just to reiterate, these are just diagrams that we've done for other projects. These are what you may see in the future. We're not 6 steps ahead already. So like up here is with some adjacencies to playfields, and how does the space within the building need to react with playfields? This one here is how maybe the front entrance starts to react to each other. Is there a public square that you can get to many different functions off of? Is the student or the classroom is it departmental? And if it is there building circulation that ties them together, or is it more clustered? So just the beginnings of what you might start seeing as we get through this process.
And again, community is very important, and making sure that everybody's involved along the way is the primary goal.
We hope to be as sort of open book as we can. We'll have these meetings, post our drawings, have a lot of one-on-one type conversations in meetings like this and others as we get down this process.
We'll be having workshops with all the teachers. We want to really listen to everybody.
We kind of jump in now to some of the site planning as we get through sort of the program and the adjacencies, and we start to see how do these all come together. One of the important things is going to be then how does it fit on the site. Again, these are 3 other projects. This happens to be a replacement school. The blue was the existing building, and the yellow is how would the replacement school fit on the site. It's in 3 dimensions, so you start to understand kind of the volumetric space of it. This one here is a high school that was also a replacement, but it turned out that the existing building was kind of away from the new building, so it just was a real simple kind of rebuild. And then this was a phased sort of site planning diagram where actually this is skyline, so it's kind of the beginning at the north, starting to grow to the south, and then finishing up with that performing arts. So again, these sort of site plan diagrams and starting to try to inform what we're understanding from the program and the adjacencies and the design guidelines, and making sure that all the committees we work with are seeing it the same way we do.
Yeah, how can we make this process of getting another building, how will it fit on the site? How can we do that with the least amount of phasing, but the least amount of impact to the students, because students will still be going to the school while this is happening. So this is what we're going to be studying. We're not just having one idea, we're going to be brainstorming and having several different approaches to see what is the best.
Last but not least, we know sustainability is a major piece of this feasibility. It'll affect the budgets a lot. It'll change decisions about size of classroom potentially, or how spread out or how condensed the building is. Again, this is just the beginnings of a list of items that we look at on other projects, and we think it'll be the beginnings of the conversation to the district of what we can look at. Anywhere from PV rooftop systems to what type of recycled materials we can use as we build the building. So again, this will be part of the discussion as we get through this process.
And it's really part of the school district's initiative to be
Net zero by
Yeah.
2040, we think it is.
Yeah, I think it's a very good thing. We're hoping other districts will adopt that, but that's really what we're going to be doing for you.
Couple other sustainable things that just as an example, we've been a part of a number of geothermal projects. Again, we're not sure that works here, but we're confident, having done it at a number of replacement schools, that we can look at that as a viable way to start to save some energy when we're heating and cooling a building as large as Highland might end up being. Again, just to reiterate, we're on a path together. Right now we're gathering. We want to hear from you. We want to make sure that we understand what it is that needs to be into this school. We'll be working on concepts pretty quickly here with the time we have. And by the 1st of February, we'll have a recommendation that we presented to the board for what this feasibility might be to replace Highland High School. Again, we're super excited. Here's just some 3-dimensional views, kind of a 3D model that we had quickly created off of a nice little internet website that does this really for you, and it just kind of helps us to start to study the building in a different angle that we can't necessarily see every day. Again, we're excited to be here. Any questions or comments? We'd love to field those today.
Thank you very much. You guys give them a round of applause, please. Now, I want to publicly apologize. We have two of our board members here. Christy, yes, Christy, we're going to acknowledge you, absolutely. And Nate Salazar, Vice President. So thank you for taking time out of your schedule and being here. And if you have any questions, those two can handle them just fine. And we have a lot of our district cabinet here tonight. We want to express our gratitude to them. And again, our boss. We're going to take some questions. Philip, don't go anywhere, because Philip might know the answer better than me. So Ty is going around gathering, so just kind of hold him up, and we'll gather up the questions as we go, and we'll start going through now.
And maybe I'll say that if we can't get to that question tonight, we're going to collect those. We'll get them on this same website that the survey's on and get those answered as we go through this process.
I absolutely love this question. I appreciate it. My career is, the genesis of my career is special education and students with special needs. And so this question is focusing on that. There's quite a few parts to it. But let me first say that as we talk about the feasibility, and I think, Phil, on one of the slides we had up there, our special needs and students with disabilities, that this is a top priority to us, and it's a great opportunity. One of the things that are challenging with the older buildings is we just kind of keep trying to adapt for accessibility, the best instructional space, and the best type of spaces for students with different disabilities. It can be challenging, as well as making sure we design spaces that addresses inclusion and making sure children are educated in the least restrictive environment. So we're 100% committed to that. So I'm trying to read all this. It said, for the school with students with disability population, how will you guarantee the building layout will not just meet ADA requirements, thank you, but ensures students with disabilities will be naturally meaningfully part of the student community and will be able to exit all portions of the building safely and quickly, and will be easier to accomplish academic inclusion like I talked about. Again, I think that you need to understand that that is one of our top priorities, and it's great to acknowledge that as a priority while we begin. Phil, I don't know if you have much experience that you can speak to that and some of the designs that you've done.
Well, I think part of even going back to our 3 E's, that equity is really making sure that it raises everybody the same. It's not just everybody gets 2 steps to step on. It's everybody's raised to that same level. And we do what we can and what we need to do that.
I also want to emphasize 2 things that this is natural, is that as we develop community and parents, please, if this is something that you have some expertise and insights, be a part of those committees. Also, we have surveys. If you go to the district website or Highland's website, there's a link to the surveys, and you can always be adding comments. And by the way, you're not locked into one survey, so if you have an epiphany next week or a month down the road, you can keep adding to that. So thank you. Great question to start out with. Okay, so perhaps most folks know this, but however, I'm curious. Thank you, great question. And that's what happened last night. We just get great insights and great questions. However, I'm curious, what are the main reasons for the rebuild? Is the renovation, non-rebuild being considered? So the district, this building opened in '57, so that's a good lifetime cycle. And so there's a lot of different things that contribute to the consideration. I would say first and foremost is instructional strategies. What's the best way to meet the needs of our kids and make sure that we're instructionally meeting their needs? That would be number one. But aside from that, we have a life cycle for utilities and mechanical systems and things like that, and it's becoming more and more difficult to meet the needs of our students. In addition to things like the first question talked about, ADA, you can adapt and you can continue to try to adjust, but those things over time are not as effective. I don't know, Phil, if you wanted to mention that.
Like a space like this is probably not up to the current ADA codes, but the district's done a great job to make it as accommodated as it can be. Even the steps in the hall where they've added those ramps, I don't think every one of those ramps is a true ADA ramp, right, but it's way better than having a
and they
set
grandfather you in.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the renovation, because that's a great question. And at a certain point, it becomes less cost effective. The building has been renovated. The district, my predecessors in the facilities have done a spectacular job of adjusting and meeting the needs of our students and continue to remodel, and it's been done time and time again. But over time, you do kind of reach the end of the life cycle of a building, and that's where we're at with Highland High. Thank you. 2 questions. I worked here for 11 years. I can feel the first question. The issue of traffic, nightmare. Yes, it is a nightmare. Oh, man. So, I wish I could just tell you we're gonna solve it, Philip. You're gonna fix it, right, Philip?
We're gonna fix it.
All right. It will get worse before it gets better when we talk about, and we're gonna be very strategic on how to stage it. But that is a priority, and it's kind of nice. I can't remember what school we were working at. It was a different firm, but it does demonstrate what an architect can do. I think it was Hillcrest, and they actually worked with UDOT and changed some of the entrances and stuff. So it does give us a chance to look at the layout and the roads and different ways of having the flow of traffic go. But it's a big lift. It's going to be a big challenge, and those of us that have spent any time here understand how challenging it is. Some of the Highland High students, Highland High are SPA students. Any collaboration with SPA and input? I think right now that the board and business administrator Kersley are having some collaboration with SPA. It would be inappropriate for me to speak to the future of that collaboration right now, but I think in the not too distant future you might get more information. Is that a fair way of saying that one, Christy? Okay, thank you. Okay, what modern or high-tech safety features do you plan to use? For example, there was a lot of glass used in the previous project. Is that bulletproof, and are there any special consideration in this area? I'm going to turn to Philip a little bit for you on that one a little bit, but I do want to say is natural lighting is really something that we prioritize in new buildings. It's great for instruction, it's great for mental health, and a lot of the things that we deal with our adolescents. But safety, I don't know if you can speak to some of the issues on safety.
Yeah, from a transparency standpoint, there's a lot of different white pages, if you will, out there that you can read and learn about people's opinions. And one that I like to point to is there's a former Navy SEAL that has started a little consulting group, and he kind of goes across the country. He's been working in Utah quite a bit, and he tells a story about how he, from his line of work, as he puts it, being able to see who's coming and where people are is a major thing. And one example he gave was, would you rather be in a football stadium outdoors and see somebody who's coming that might be doing something they shouldn't, or in an auditorium with 6 closed doors and have it all of a sudden jump in at you, right? And so his opinion, and most that I've seen, say that transparency is good for that very reason, so you can sort of see what's coming and see what's happening outside of your school. To add to that, something we like to say is many ways out, one way in. As often as we can, we want to have one way into the school. High school is very tough, especially with open campuses, but we like to think about it like that, is we can filter everybody through one set of doors. They have to be buzzed into the district or to the office before they get into the school, so they get checked in, and they're not just coming in of a side door. So that's kind of a part of that transparency.
Yeah, and I think Phil just did a great, certain the vestibules and how people enter the building will have the opportunity to start from scratch and really develop safe entrances and security for the exits and things of that sort. So thank you. The second question, this is great. When approved, I like that positive affirmation. Thank you, whoever wrote that. How long until construction starts and finishes? So I'm going to speak to this, but this is by all means not chiseled in stone. So this is hypothetical. So we're doing the feasibility study, which actually postures us in a great way. The folks that got the contract, so Philip knows he's doing all this work, in that if we pass the bond, that's the firm that's building it. So that's important to understand. So after we do the feasibility, Christy Sweat in the board meeting this past Tuesday night, which seems like 100 years ago now, really brought up some great things about how in-depth the committees become. And a lot of the work we're going to do now, I'm sorry, I need to stay in the spotlight, sorry, we'll have community input, but it'll take about a year, is that a fair way to say, to make the actual plans, the construction plans? Yeah. So November, the bond passes, we pivot, and all of a sudden we jump right in, and we're going to develop the plans, about a year. So that gets us to November 24, and so the beginning of 25, we break ground and we're off and running. Is that a pretty
Yeah, and maybe the only difference there might be is if you find that there's an early phase that needs to happen that could be produced early so that, I don't know, a portable classroom could be constructed so that as soon as construction really starts, you have somebody. So there's a lot of questions still to ask before we get there, but I think your timeline is exactly
Just
what I
that
was
in
thinking.
general, Christie, is anything, am I missing anything there? That sound about, you've done a lot of elementary schools over the years. Great, thank you. I'm concerned about my current students spending potentially years in portables. What is the plan for classes while the new building is construction? Good for Philip, you're absolutely right. I just want to say, we don't know, but I'll let Philip kind of speak to some of the things they've done. So the phasing and when we're building one and
Yeah, and maybe I'll start by, I mentioned I'm a product of the Salt Lake School District. I was attending West High School during its last major addition, and interestingly enough, last night I was at that meeting and I thought, well, I've only been in this auditorium once or twice, because it was all being finished my senior year. And so I transferred from the old tech building to across the street to the old, was that the old Horizonte? I don't know if that's what it's called.
I
but-
think that's right.
So those students will turn out okay, I think, if I turned out okay. But really, like what Lehigh High School did, they had procured a 32 classroom, we sort of called it a satellite portable. It wasn't just what you think of a double wide portable, and it had running water, and they actually served lunch out of there for a little bit of time. And it was during the study of that site we determined the most economical thing was to put that there for almost a full 2 years of school. And it just allowed those students to have a place to be, and they weren't changing spots 3 times during that sort of 2-year period. So again, we don't know. We don't know if any of the building has to come down while it's being built. We won't know that until we really start getting into what these studies tell us.
I'm going to pull a quick one right now. I'm going to pull my boss, Alan Kersley. Come on up, Alan. I don't think you can get away with the whole night without participating. This is a great question. It says, how does the district plan to pay for the potential rebuild? And last night we had a question that said, what is a bond? So I think you could probably address it in the same flavor.
So as we're looking at both West and Highland, in order to afford those construction costs, we will need to go to the public and have a bond election. What that does is any bonds that school districts issue have to be approved by the voters. So that will be, we're looking at November 2023 for that bond election. And that, as described last night, is like a big mortgage or a big loan that we can go get, and then we'll use those proceeds to pay for the construction costs and then pay those off over the term of the loan.
I love these questions because these are things that I think people are thinking about, and I don't. It says, will the boundaries of the school change? I think Christy and Nate, I'm probably very safe in saying that there is no consideration of boundary change on the table at all. The schools, both West and Highland, will be on the same campus, so we don't anticipate any need to change boundaries. Am I speaking okay for the board there? All right. Great question. Number one, do you have an estimated budget for the project? The answer is absolutely not. That's why we hired Philip to help us, because that's what we need to get to. We need to have it so we can go to the board and say, this is kind of what we think you need to plan for it to go out to bond. I'm not here to throw the bus at some of my colleagues, but some districts have had the unfortunate experience of passing a bond, and by the time the bond passes, they're already under budget. So we want to make sure that doesn't happen. So that's why we are doing this feasibility study. Hats off to the board for allowing us to do that, but it allows us to be better prepared. So this is a great strategy, and we appreciate the board allowing us to do it in this manner, because we can be much more fiscally responsible. Can you give us an idea what the budget was for Olympus and Brighton? I'm really not, you'd have to call Granite and Canyons to those. I don't actually have those off the top of my head. How will the athletics be impacted during a rebuild? Again, that's part of the purpose of this study, is how we could stage it, what way things might be affected. You know, do you have to shut down Field X during construction, or can we avoid that? That's why we're doing this the way we are, and why we're trying to be thoughtful and get out in front of this and dig deep now, so we can know what we're walking into. Thoughts about that? I mean, you've had experience moving stuff around like that.
Yeah, during the study, we determined that a football field or an auditorium or something can't be offline for a certain time, then that's just informs our study and maybe says some of our concepts go by the wayside. At the same time, if not living with an auditorium potentially means savings of some dollars, that may put that concept closer to the top. So that's why we like to be on this process early on, and so we can really start to understand what can and can't happen on this site.
So you can, as you ask these questions, you can see, again, kudos to the board and for Mr. Kersley and stuff, allowing us to be, this is such a responsible way of doing it, is by doing this feasibility study before you go to a bond, before you do, we're just more prepared for the process. Thank you. Is there data, I think you can answer this one. I could venture an educated guess. Is there data that indicates a new school increases academic achievement?
I don't have a study of myself that has done it, but I've read a number of examples from other parts of the country, even in the state. I can think of Ogden School District opened up a new elementary school, and they had some data. So yeah, we could dig that out, I think. I haven't been a part of a study myself.
Yeah. And I think that we can dig it out. And I want to add that we're going to post these questions and answers on the website associated with the feasibility study. But one of the things I think the answer is we can dig in for this, but one of the things that Philip addressed, and I mentioned it just briefly, is we're going to try to develop and create the best instructional space. So one thing that we know, one thing Jeremy knows, and I know that I've been in the business for a while, we know that as you have professional learning opportunities for teachers to collaborate, for students to collaborate, that student performance increases. So we're going to naturally build a building that's going to facilitate that much more at a higher rate and just make it easier for kids and for the adults to have that type of collaborative environment. And so I'm not pointing to a study, but the natural extension is that it should be better for student performance. But we'll dig in a little bit. I'm sure we can find some and post it on the website.
Well, and even information that confirms that as students are leaving schools at this age now, they're going into corporations that are way more collaborative than they were when students were leaving the building when Highland was first built, in the mid-50s.
We kind of talked about this one a little bit, but I think it absolutely bears repeating and circling back to what will you do to make the school, the building safer. Those things will be involved in the collaboration, whether it's the type of glass that we use, the vestibules, the secured entries and exits will be used, and it's even the hallway. The hallways are designed. A lot of these older schools have these very narrow hallways, and they're not as safe. And so this is definitely one of the pillars that we're considering, and all things are on the table. And I think we're learning a lot about how to make schools safer. But you need to go away from this meeting knowing this is a top priority. Almost every rebuild we've had in the district has been too small. How do you ensure we are big enough building? And population predictions in the past have not been accurate, and how do you control for that? Well, I would say I've been in the district a long time, so I can't remember who who was his predecessor? Gary Smith and Sam Quantz, I've worked with for 18, 19 years, and I will tell you that their enrollment predictions have been almost scary accurate. So we do have, I think, some very good, 20 years worth of data. I will tell you that the high schools, we talked about this last night, are a little bit counterintuitive to the elementary schools. They keep maintaining their enrollment. So I think Highland's right around 2,000, is that right? And we're going to build it for 2,500. So we're allowing for growth and from some flexibility there. Salt Lake High Schools are also home to daycare, preschool programs that are labs for high school students. Does Naylor Wentworth have experience in designing early childhood spaces?
Yes. We've done a number at
Oh.
other high schools. And,
Yeah. Almost every high school have these type of programs, and I want you to know there's a priority to us to maintain those spaces. Our child care for our employees are exceptional value, and the carry over to provide an educational experience for our students has proven very effective over the years.
I'll say one thing that we often find is because they have different schedules than maybe the normal classroom drop-off is, and do you force them to go through the same security? And so there's a lot of discussion we'll have about that type of a program, when where should they be on the site versus, typical student drop-off versus that type of drop-off. So there's a lot of discussion to have there.
Great. How will you take into account the needs of even the littlest rams? Every ram is important to us. But in all fairness, to you, this is a great question. We will be collaborating with the daycare providers and the teachers in those space, and I would anticipate that we'd bring parents in and their experience with the child care in the preschool. And that'll just be part of what we do. It'll be part of the collaboration.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. This might be for Christy or for Alan or for Nate. I'd like to throw you guys to the question. Why do we have to wait until November 23 to vote on the bond? Why not 22? Come on up, boss.
I know that.
So one of the reasons is we need to know how much we're going to bond for. So this process which we're doing, which will take through February, will give us a dollar amount, because we have to go to the taxpayers and say, we want to go out and get a bond for X number of dollars, and we don't have that dollar amount at this moment. In addition, it takes a lot of time to really inform the community of why we need to bond and what we plan on doing with it. So we need that time as well, once we get those numbers, to work with the community so they understand the need for the bond.
The last question we have is when's the next public meeting? We don't have a hard date, but our anticipation is that we'll have a public meeting in November, and then we'll have another one in January. So every other month we're going to be meeting. So if you came tonight, my biggest request is to bring 5 friends with you to the next one. Okay, we want to hear from you, but that's our tentative. Again, we don't have hard dates. We'll probably get to that pretty quickly so we can post that and people can plan appropriately. Alan, Nate, Christy, anything that you want to see, anything we've left out that we need to share? Please go onto the websites, do the surveys, because you're going to, and then you can put comments in there. So you're going to go home tonight and say, oh, I should have asked this, or what about this? And that's where you can pepper us all the way through the process, and we'll be looking at that and responding appropriately. You're always welcome to call Jeremy, and Jeremy knows how to get a hold of me, and I know how to get a hold of Philip. So, you don't have to wait for the next public meeting. You can get a hold of us, and we can tap into you at any time. But please do fill out the surveys and share comments. We have one more, maybe? I'm on pins and needles. Okay, we're good for tonight. Unless, Nate, what's that? Okay, that'd be great.
Hi, I'm Yandy. I'm the district spokesperson. So this one's not related to the building, but someone asked for us to comment on the impact of the superintendent situation. So the day-to-day for students doesn't really change as the board works through the agreements that they have with the superintendent. And the same is true for this process. This is something the board has been talking about for a while. They went through a very careful process through the RFP process to hire these really talented architects. And so we know that our students here at Highland are in really good hands throughout this process.
All right, well, again, thank you everyone for coming out tonight and helping us in this process. We're really excited to see what the feasibility is and what we can do with the new Highland High School. But again, thanks for coming out. Have a great rest of your weekend. Go Rams.